the topic, building bridging, promoting dialogue, but also acknowledging the problems that we face within our societies and affecting our relations, I think are very much at the center of our agenda. It's good that we have a number of international partners also joining us, and we have voices from the civil society, and we have voices from the governments, from media, from the politics. So I think this is one of the good things about the Security Days. So I would like to thank all of you for joining us for this debate. I hope it will be a good debate. It will be enriching for all of us. I would like to encourage you to be also active part of the debate. We have a panel, and there will be points made by the panelists, possibly a discussion among the panelists, but the discussion should also involve the public, so feel free also to jump in. So with this very brief introduction, I would like to pass now the mic to Ms. Habib, who will now introduce the panelists and the topic of the panel. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary. Welcome, everybody. So we have one panelist coming in. So before introducing the panelists, I remind you, so the subject is how can the media help prevent radicalization that leads to terrorism? It's quite a wide subject, and we'll try to deal with it as journalists, meaning not to hesitate to be interrupted. You do it, we will do it too, to your questions. I will say a few words only that radicalization is not a new phenomenon. However, it presents journalists today with professional and ethical challenges. There is no self-radicalization. So it's important to look at the elements, factors, the narratives that trigger it. Yes, unbalanced, inaccurate reporting often exacerbate radicalization. But radicalization is also seen, and this time I will just talk for a little bit about the Arab world, as being the result of dictatorships, with the lack of freedom, restrictions on gatherings, except in the mosques, and educational systems that haven't moved for years, lack of heroes. There are no heroes in the Arab world. At least in dictatorships, and not only in the Arab world. Heroes are supposed to be the dictators themselves. And also, of course, the sectarian rifts that we are witnessing today. What is happening is that dictators have benefited from the rise of terrorism. There was an Arab Spring that stopped, and today they don't even have to make concessions on anything that was asked about. Dictators are appearing to be the better choice when you compare them with ISIS and all the terrorist groups. I will just say that press, there are two media. There's a media that is working in such environment and circumstances, and the media that is working in democratic countries. And we have to discuss today how both can help, and each one with the environment and the space that they have. Briefly, since 2011, never the media was under restriction and pressure as it is now in the Arab world. There has been more restrictive laws in the name of fighting terrorism. There have been pressure from governments and religious institutions. So it's a very mixed, complicated situation. We have to bear in mind that we have those two media, and we will talk about that in the panel. I will now introduce the panelists for you. We have Ms. Dunja Mijatovic. She is the OSCE representative on freedom of the media. We have Mr. Simon Hayslock, who is the co-founder and director of Albany Associates. Mr. Victor Hurl, correspondent of Rossiya Segodnya, International Information Agency, and Ms. Leila Gandhi. She is a TV host, journalist, and producer. I would suggest that we start with the fact that people are now pointing a finger at, new media, the role of the media, how much the media is affecting the rise in radicalism and helping, in a way, terrorists to pass their messages along. Let us discuss about it. Is it really the case? Is really the new media a tool in the hands of terrorism? How can the media stop that? And is it really necessary to stop it? I mean, should journalists avoid using the communiques? This is quite impossible. So would you like to start, Ms. Dunia, please?
Good evening. It's wonderful to be here, and it's great that we managed to address this issue, and I applaud our Secretary General for introducing this topic in order to try to bring together all these things that I'm trying to do for the past 5 years: security and human rights. It cannot be discussed in two parallel worlds. And this is a great opportunity, and I'm honored to be in such a distinguished panel, also with a good friend and a colleague of mine, Simon Hayslock. And I just have to mention that back in 90s, actually 98, Simon was a colleague who came to Bosnia after the war. And after all these horrifying things that we had in Bosnia and Herzegovina related to the atrocities, genocide, but also media issues, and he tried, together with other colleagues and also people from Bosnia and Herzegovina, to build sustainable institutions that can fight issues that we are discussing today. But fight those issues without suppressing free speech, without suppressing human rights, opening up debate on the issues that are painful, sensitive, extremely controversial in so many societies, but also issues that are, in a way, often in our world, put under the carpet. It's better not to discuss it, and it's better to hide problems. And the governments are the ones doing this most of the time. OSCE states, but also beyond. How media can help prevent violent radicalization that leads to terrorism. It's a great question, but I do not think we can have a formula or an answer to this. What I can say as the OSCE representative on freedom of the media, only media that is free and not restricted, only media in the society that foster media freedom and not restrict media freedom. It is not an easy way. But what we see most of the time, that most governments are hoping that they will solve the problem for different reasons, by blocking, filtering, stopping news, telling people that they should not watch certain issues because they cannot handle it, and they will handle it for themselves, for them. So those are the issues that are creating even greater problems in a society that are turbulent, that are undergoing certain transitions on the road to democracy, or totalitarian regimes. We cannot discuss this issue by saying we are all the same, because we are not. We have different rules, even though on paper sometimes we are the OSCE, we say we are all the same, and we honor and value all the commitments related to the security, related to media freedom, related to human rights, economic issues, everything. We honored these values, and this is something that is extremely important for us. But at home, the stories are different, and we are facing huge problems. And those problems are global. They are affecting the societies. They are affecting media, independent media, investigative journalism. And the answer on how we can actually address these things is something that many scholars and many people are trying to address. And I always said that I think that the OSCE is a great platform to discuss these things. It's a great place where we can bring all these issues together and discuss the most painful topics of our societies in order to find a way to bring some results and for the benefit of our people, of our OSCE family and beyond. But the situation, as I said, is not rosy at all. What I see that most governments are doing, they are looking at the internet as the main vehicle, as the main tool that needs to be stopped. Social media, here I talk about Facebook, Twitter, any other platforms that we have. The answer from most of the governments, new or old democracies, is let's block it, let's restrict it, and they will tell us what we want them to tell us. This is not a solution in any society. And this is not something that my office is promoting, and in a way, to discuss issue of the content and the messaging when it comes to violent radicalization that leads to terrorism, I need to take my OSCE freedom of media hat off, because in a way I do not engage in the content. That is not the role of the representative. I try to make sure that the states are complying with the commitments that they voluntarily agreed upon. This is not a place to talk about results we have at the moment, but if we look at the results and we see how media are behaving and what is actually happening to journalists in so many states, OSCE region and beyond, is devastating. And it is because of terrorism, radicalism, extremism. The countries are more and more adopting the laws,
So you
restricting.
feel that, in fact, what is happening is helping this kind of regime to, or totalitarian ones, to hit on the media when they need the most the media at this particular time?
I would not say so. I think that the main issue here is that many governments, and if we think that all governments they want to protect their societies, so there is a goodwill behind it. So there is no need to restrict free speech because this speech is critical of the government. So they want to really protect society in order to make a safe environment. They do not know what to do in so many cases. They do not know how to tackle, for example, I use certain case, a certain clip, video clip that is shown in a society. So they just block it without trying to find the root of the problem, without trying to go and talk to people, without engaging community. This is not a fight against terrorism. It is not a fight that can be dealt with without engagement of the civil society. And the problem I see is that the governments are really looking into the situation where they hope to solve this on their own, restricting information and really keeping the wall behind them and civil society. And that is one of the main problems I see.
So banning is not a solution, and it's probably amplified. Victor, can you tell me, in your opinion, I mean, if the role of the websites and the new media is probably amplified, is there things that particularly that concern the way that the media is covering, especially ISIS, or even in your area, I mean, things related to Ukraine or anything of the sort, that where you'll find that the role of the media is not the one that you expect?
Media belong to some people. I think all the media belong to the audience, to the readers, to those who read or watch or listen to, or do not read, doesn't want. And my point is that still the most influent media are media which are equipped with professional journalists, with quality of information, with proved facts, and so on. And I would address to myself and my colleagues with the question, if we in our texts, in our coverage, are accurate enough. Sometimes it seems to me that we do advertise terrorism. Just one example. I have no answer to the question why in mainstream media all over the world, in English, in Russian, in different languages, the self-proclaimed self-established state in the Middle East is still called Islamic State. I think it's a big mistake. I think it's a kind of advertising of these people who call themselves as Muslims, call their state as Islamic State, and despite of many voices against it, starting from US President Obama to Islamic spiritual leaders from Egypt, from other countries, from Russia, for example, we still use this word, confusing the audience with this correlation with Islam and what do these people are doing under this umbrella. But I think it is still possible to make an agreement, to have a kind of convention of professionals, of those who cover the events on Middle East, to find other words to describe this so-called state and its activity. We have very positive example in Russia, for example. In Donbass, last year, during the conflict, some people called themselves Orthodox Army of Donbass, taking religious word Orthodox, but with the protests of Russian Orthodox Church, Ukrainian Orthodox churches, media, they listened to these complaints and these demands, and they stopped use these words to name these people. It seems to me that if we are invited to make some proposals to OSCE executive structures, this could be one of the proposals, concrete one, to stop use Islamic as a word towards the state in Middle East.
I think those organizations know how to attract the media, and the media, at the end of the day, when there is news, will have to publish it. I would like to, can you tell us a little bit your opinion about that? How can a journalist deal with that? How can you ignore news?
Well, obviously, media are used today, and it is a powerful tool. It is present in our daily life everywhere, media. We are exposed to it. So I would suggest for us to try to use it for the best, while they use it for the worse. And there are ways. I mean, I will just like to say something about the words. I totally agree with yourself. When we talk about Islamic, we fuel the myth, the misinterpretation, the misperception, but yet we have to acknowledge the fact that they call themselves Muslim. We can simply call them terrorists, because even if they call themselves Muslim, they are a disease of the Islam. It's extremist Islam, but they are a product of Islam. It's a pathology of Islam. And they are simply terrorists. And I believe there are ways to address through media. I think media are a powerful channel, and we should take advantage of it. Media do not only provide information, facts, or entertainment. Media also affect our lives by shaping our opinions, our belief, our attitude, our behaviors. For me, the key word is education. Is education through media. Education in the meaning of raising awareness. Education in the meaning of contributing to a better understanding between culture. Education in a way that we can easily see that from Western country to Eastern country, North or South Mediterranean, for example, we are full of misperception. We don't really know each other. We don't really know what is Muslim people. We are full of stereotypes. I will have stereotypes, you will have stereotypes. When I present myself and they tell me, oh, you're Moroccan, we cannot tell you're Moroccan. And I say, no, you know, I'm Arab, I'm Muslim, I'm a woman and I am free and I'm probably not what you think I am, but still I am Arab, Muslim, woman. This is not only the representation you have of it. So I think here is something we really need to work on, is to try to counter the stereotypes. And I think we all are at some level a little guilty of it. In Western countries, some of the time we use stereotype to talk about the Muslim communities. Maybe it's time for everybody to see that it's plural community, diversity, and we are not all the same. Our interpretation of Islam is different. Since you talk about media, I will talk from my experience. I host a TV show in Morocco. It's broadcast on the most popular public channel named Deuxième, and it is viewed every month by over 2 million people. And to me, it is every month the opportunity to talk to 2 million people. It is for me every month the opportunity to try to promote universal values, to try to spread messages, to try to build up bridges between culture. And I think this kind of program exists all around the world. Maybe we can use it a little more in order to contribute to a better understanding. And it is a very simple, informal kind of travel program that goes all around the world, but yet with an agenda behind to raise issues. We talk about politics, we talk about religion, we talk about culture, about society, and at the end people watch the show because it's not very formal. People get to link to me, to connect to me because I am my own, and then we talk about things and we can make statements. Very concrete example. When there is this scene, I am in a city, very conservative city, and I am surrounded by 10 men who try to convince me to wear the veil because I am Muslim. They tell me, if you are Muslim, you should wear the veil. Otherwise, you're not Muslim. And I have the cameraman filming me, and then I think to the audience, and I say, there is a point here. So they put the veil on my head, and then I say, I take it off. I look at them, I look at the camera, and I said, I do not agree with you. I am Muslim, and I do not want to wear the veil, and this is my freedom. And this is the freedom of every woman to choose by herself. Either she wants or does not want to wear the veil, and nobody can force me to. This is a statement. When I meet Tunisian Jew in Djerba, and we speak about the tension that can happen between Jewish people and Muslim people, and he take my Moroccan shesh, put it in his head, and I take his kippah and I put it on my head, and we say, okay, we are all one. This is a statement we make for building bridges between culture, while this very specific conflict is said to be one of the trigger of the extremism. So this is also making a statement through very informal and simple ways. So my point is that media can be used, and maybe we don't use them enough. When we talk about cooperation, maybe one way also could be to identify all the programs very different from the advertising to a documentary that are around the world, and maybe see if we can spread them more or duplicate them. Maybe it's also a possibility that we can see.
Yes, religion never attracted media, and probably now it is an attraction because of extremism, and people are getting interested. Some of them may be hearing about some religion for the first time. I was wondering, Simon, if you can tell us, do you think, the time for media to tackle religious issue with the same consistency that we tackle politics and economy, because most of the problem is somehow religiously based?
I'm not entirely sure that I accept that this is about religion. And I think there's going to be a session tomorrow which will look at the drivers of radicalism, and there's a lot of discussion about whether it's about religion or it's about other things, and we perhaps shouldn't go into that now. I would like to sort of really go back to your first question to talk about, the difference between the emergence of the digital and the use of social media, because I think Dunja kindly referred to when we worked together in Bosnia in the 90s, where the media situation then in the 90s was very, very different to that which it is now. Essentially in Bosnia, we were looking at newspapers and analog television stations run by definable organizations where they could be asked to correspond to notions of journalistic professionalism. The emergence of the digital space has meant that you've seen the emergence of citizen journalism, which is a good thing, but it enables people to sort of cry almost anything. And so people tend to consume digital media in a very different way to that which they used to consume more traditional media. And I think so one of the things that I think we need to consider in this space is not necessarily what is a quick fix, but we need to understand media literacy much better than I think we do. Because I still think that the world looks at the media through the prism of the analog age in terms of media houses and in terms of the way journalism works, and has not yet adapted to the impact of citizen journalism and how you cope with that. And the problem with that is that people don't understand how to tell the difference between what is highly opinionated commentary as opposed to independent, neutral, professional commentary. And I think this is an education issue, and I think it's something that needs to be done much more effectively on a global level to ensure that people understand how to distinguish between opinionated, radical comment and opinion and proper facts and information. We need to think of innovative ways in which to get people to understand this. Now, it may be that actually this will happen over time anyway, because I think that if you look at the sort of people in government, they tend to come from my generation, the digital immigrants, if you like. And as people become more native in the use of digital tools, and those people understand them better, perhaps the situation will become better when people understand how this works. But my own personal view is that the other area that we need to look at in terms of these media is to look at the platforms on which that they are distributed. If you take a traditional regulatory model where you would expect analog broadcasters to accept some basic professional standards as a condition of using a scarce resource, which is a terrestrial frequency, platforms don't necessarily have that same responsibility. To what extent is Google, YouTube, etc. responsible for the content that they put on their platforms? And these are interesting questions. It's a difficult thing to talk about. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that there should be statutory regulation, and I agree with Dunja. But the old media model was to actually expect the platforms to have a responsible code of conduct when it came to what they put on those platforms. And I think that's an issue that's not yet fully been explored. It's very contentious, and I know there's been a lot of discussion about it, but to what extent are the platforms, should they work harder to actually look at the stuff that they actually put on their airways?
I mean, when it was the time of Osama bin Laden and he had a message, all TVs were broadcasting it, and now it's the same with Baghdadi and ISIS. But what I would like to ask is really the role of the media to introduce ethics? Yes, but is it the role of the media now to enter into what to publish and not to publish? I mean, can you convince the media to ignore sometimes events that are happening, even if they could be harmful in a sense that they could influence or impact on a younger generation?
Also, maybe there is a difference, just one sentence, between not saying and saying it too much. Sometimes we feel like it's advertising because it's selling, and it's good to speak about this topic because it's scary and people will watch, and people, so maybe there is a balance we should find between those two extremes.
Victor, what do you think? Because obviously ISIS is taking advantage of it, and they know exactly what the media want. We were talking earlier about Palmyra, and I was with Simon, and I was saying, I mean, I bet you they're going to do something because everybody is expecting them to do something, and they know how to choose their targets and how to attract the media.
Yeah, I agree with Simon that the key point is media literacy. And I think that the efforts to educate people in media perception, in media consumption, are not efficient enough, and it seems to me that this subject could be introduced even in secondary schools. Then the people from university could come to children and to give them some, I would say, security, safety advices regarding this media. But the main question is still the agenda setting and framing of the events by big media. If scandals, if events with radicals, religious radicals, attract more audience, they will be transmitted, they will be covered, because still our media are very much audience dependent, not in terms of quality of the content, but in terms of quantity of how many people clicked on your website or watched your TV program. And in order to draw this attention, you can then sell this attention to advertisers. You use some things that are not appropriate, not ethical, but you do this. And I think that it's much better to educate the audience and more efficient to stop watching things that you are convinced you should not watch than to educate those in charge of broadcasting policy, of agenda setting.
Yeah, Dunya, can I ask you, I mean, you were saying earlier that, as I agree totally with you, that there are two kinds of media. I mean, the media and the environment where the media is working. But strangely enough, it's in democratic country where media can openly write about everything. And this is becoming a tool that is helping the extremists because everything is being published. While in countries where there are more restrictions, most of the local media cannot publish only what is being cleared. How do you deal with that from the human rights approach?
Can you clarify what you mean? In democratic countries, they can publish everything, so it's helping.
Well, when you have restrictions in countries that are not so democratic, maybe sometimes when it's not to the benefit of the country, some of the things are just barred and will not be published. But I think ISIS is also taking advantage of the open space, and they know that whatever the situation, even if it's not, yeah.
I think they take advantage of whatever they want to take advantage of, no matter if it is published or not. In a way, as you say, I mean, even if it is restricted and it's not in public immediately, history taught us, I mean, before the internet existed, whatever you bury under the carpet or under the table, it will come out. And it will affect the society even more and even, you know, with a greater negative effect than you can imagine. We mentioned here education and literacy, and I think we fail as a societies globally in educating younger generations how to protect themselves from you know, certain issues that they see on the internet, how to deal with this. And I think this is something that should be discussed at the international organizations, forums, and media literacy and internet literacy in particular is of extreme importance, and I would not say just education in the school, I think it's kindergarten, how to protect young generations from this kind of radical violence or extremism that can affect their lives and then the societies. I do not think media is the only one that can engage in this particular topic that we were discussing here. It is a global challenge. It is a challenge for the community. And what we need to do is do more of these things that sounds a bit sort of that we live in ideal world, but we do not, unfortunately. We live in a very real and cruel world, but we still need to find a way to build bridges and to connect people to talk about what Leila was saying just now about prejudice, conspiracy theories, all these things that are actually killing the process that can lead to a more free world. And many governments and many organizations are not willing to engage in this. And this is also tremendously affecting media in so many countries, because they are told by the governments that the enemy is somewhere there. And the enemy can be also the issue that you were just mentioning, Islam, or something that is presented in the Western world, but it can also be suddenly West. We are hearing constantly in too many countries that the West is an evil, and we have to fight it. So it's not, it's something that we need to find a way in order to be very realistic for all of us to be able to have a very long and honest look in a mirror in the morning when we get up, and to ask ourselves, particularly journalists, in which direction are they moving or using media in order to sort of affect the society.
Yeah, Simon, you wanted to say?
Yes, I just wanted to return a bit more to this theme of media literacy. I mean, I think we concentrate a lot on what we talk about and how the media operates in the sophisticated world. And we look at it from the point of view of how it affects developed countries. I mean, the thing about this explosion in digital media is how it's affected countries that haven't got a tradition of understanding media in a sort of a long tradition. All of a sudden, people have jumped from no information systems to the most advanced that you can get. I mean, if you look at the spread of 3G telephones, for instance, in Africa, I mean, when I give some presentations on communications, I show a photograph of when we were doing some work in Darfur. We ran a horse racing event to bring Arab tribes together to get them to talk about their problems. And I took a photograph of these Arab tribesmen riding past on their horse, looking like something from the 19th century. And when I looked at the photograph afterwards, I saw something which was a guy with a mobile phone taking a photograph of me, taking a photograph of him. Now that photograph, at the press of a button, could be anywhere in the world in a nanosecond. And I think the problem is that we have difficulty coping with this. How do you expect societies that are moving very quickly from very, very traditional and non-media savvy environments to having to cope with the most advanced systems that they've got? And this is where I think the focus needs to be, because radicalism doesn't start on the international level, it starts at the grassroots. And we tend to think of the sort of big narratives, not the individual local narratives where these things start. And religion may be something that people grab onto in order to meet certain other grievances. But the grievances and the discourse and the dialogue and the transparency at the grassroots in the various places which are affected by this is where we need to be working. And I think that's why this is a real issue. If communities and societies are suddenly going to go from nothing to having the most advanced information technology that you can get, we need to be able to give them the tools to be able to understand and use it properly and discern how to use it properly. Thank you.
And last question, and then we'll give the floor an opportunity to ask questions. But do you think that hatred and intolerance and this message of that is coming out should be barred by the media, and in order to combat Islamophobia and all kind of hate speech that comes out? Who would like to comment?
Well, media is a mean among others. It's not the only one, obviously. I mean, there is the NGOs working on it, there is the political authorities. Everyone could be able to work on it. Every one of us here in this room has its way of countering this, what you said. So media is just one of the ways, and since we are talking about media today, yes, we can say that media is powerful to fight stereotypes and intolerance. This is a fact. I mean, obviously, we cannot really control the way radicalism use social media, but we certainly can try to control the way they use traditional media. And to tell you the truth, I'm really not happy when I have the feeling that traditional media is playing their role by promoting and broadcasting the video they are sending through social media. I think it's bad. I think we should find a way not to do it. I think we should not, reduce the exposure of this, of what they commit, because we are just helping them in some way. So yeah, media can be a tool, but it is not the only one. It is even more a tool in the countries where media have more impact, where there is a literacy rate that is not very high, where the image is powerful, radio is powerful, TV is powerful. It is something that can really help address the issues. In France, for example, one day I've seen this advertising spot. They literally used the same codes and narratives of the radical movement. We are talking about Islamic State, you know, the propaganda they use over the social media. They use the code of the teenagers, video games kind of narrative. It's very attractive. Well, in France, they designed counter-propaganda using this very same narrative, targeted to the same audience, saying that basically what you hear and what you see is not the truth. If you go with them, if you believe in what they say, then you will find yourself in a very, very bad situation. They use another kind of media way, is that they try to bring people who were recruited through social media. Let's say if they go to Libya and other places, and then they go there and they see that this is not at all what they expected to be, because most of the people, they go there because they think it's like humanitarian work, and then they get them back to France and they get them to do testimonies, to witness and to be a role model. Okay, this is my mistake, don't fall into the same mistake. In your introduction, you spoke about hero. We need hero. I think we do need heroes. We need inspiration. We need people to have example to refer to look up to, and have the courage not to fall into these dangers.
Yeah, would you like to? And Simon also, and Victor. Yeah, Simon.
The question of how you regulate hate speech, etc., is an extremely difficult one, and it always has been. Again, if you go back to the 90s, Rwanda and Bosnia, etc., in many ways it was much easier to deal with it in those days, because you have analog broadcasting platforms which are licensed and given, you know, the declarations on human rights, which put, you know, freedoms and responsibilities, and there's a whole question of responsibilities that people forget. So basically there's nothing against international human rights law which says that broadcasters and media outlets don't have responsibilities as well as freedoms. So there is a need to talk about responsibilities as well as the freedoms, I think, a little bit more. The problem is, how do you then actually translate that into this new media environment that we have? I think that's why it's worth talking to platforms in terms of how they regulate content that they have on their platforms. But I think that the other thing that I think is important, and it does refer to this, is the fact that I also think that, you know, we in the sort of developed world have become very cynical about our own values. And again, it's a very difficult question, but we tend not to talk up these things. You know, we don't tend to talk enough in a general narrative about, you know, the universal rights, the universal things in which we stand for. And that enables these radical organizations to actually capture some of the moral high ground as far as the sort of naive and radicalized views that they have. So this question of hate speech is something that we should be attacking on the basis of rights versus responsibilities. Thank you.
It's true, media plays enormous role, but it's not the only part of the society that can be part of solution. At the same time, what we also have, and we have to be very realistic, is that media inciting and media injecting hatred among people, media being used by the governments in order to do this. I'm very much against pointing finger at the media and saying media is responsible for the war, media is responsible, because this is what we heard again, back to my own part of the world, Bosnia. This is what we heard, and this was a narrative that was used. Media is guilty. We are killing each other because of media. It's fake. It's something that brings even more problems within the society. As Simon was saying, regulation of the analog broadcasting and the old traditional media is, in a way, I would not say it's past time, but it's something that nobody is really discussing nowadays, because we have regulatory authorities in most of the countries, more or less successful, dealing with the code of ethics, licensing, etc. The problem is, again, internet, and many questions on how to regulate internet. And the question is most of the time answered: you do not regulate internet. You use declarations, you use human rights offline and online in the same way. How do you deal with the content that is affecting the society in a very negative way by inciting hatred, calling for violence, riots, killing people? It has to be dealt with. And even as somebody who is promoting freedom all the time, even somebody whose mission is to promote media freedom, there is a content that needs to be stopped and blocked. We should not be reluctant in saying that there is a need to do this. But most of the cases that I see, and the way this is tackled, is that the governments are actually taking the responsibility from the courts, and there is no judicial oversight in the issues of potentially content that is not acceptable to some of the parts of the society. What I would also like to mention is constant talks that we have internationally, in international organizations, but NGOs, but also the industry, of the need to have some sort of Magna Carta of the internet. So some sort of declaration for cyberspace that will cover also all these so-called newcomers, bloggers, social media activists, all the people that are engaging and that are in a way by many governments seen as a main problem, because they are targeted, because they are not proper journalists, as they say. And many governments are in this process saying, let's define who is and who is not a journalist. This is also a very dangerous road.
Yeah. Victor?
Coming back to the question, if media are guilty or not guilty, I would like to convert it, to transfer it from ethical terms, guilty, not guilty, from blaming, into terms of responsibility and accountability. Still, it is very important what is exposed, what is underexposed, and what is overexposed. According to recent sociological data in Russia, for 51% of Russians, TV is the only channel of receiving news. So we see the very much monopolized by television media consumption. And in this particular case, without discussing responsibility or accountability of media, we cannot avoid this this topic. And let us look more attentively what is overexposed. If train arrives timely, it's not a subject of coverage. If train is late, it's maybe a topic. And if it is a crash, an accident, it's front page story. Therefore, I think I have a feeling that, and I am sure that it could be proved with empirical data, that normativity in media is lost into some deviations, lost in, surrounded by some not normal things. And it's a big problem that should be comprehended.
Thank you. I think we'll take questions now. I propose that we take 3 questions, and then the floor will, the panelists will answer you. gentleman, and then the lady, and somebody from another, you. Okay. Can you please give your name and...
Yeah, Tariq Al-Ansari. I'm from the UN Alliance of Civilizations. I want to talk about the legal requirements for regulations, and indeed there are regulations, I mean legal instruments, UN resolution, Security Council resolution, and also legal instruments. So we shouldn't be reluctant in regulating. The other issue is the restrictions. It also took place in other developed countries, not only the Middle East. So it happens everywhere and still happening, just to elaborate on.
Your question?
Just comments.
Ah, okay.
Thank you.
Can we have next one? We can answer the comment also. Sorry?
Thank you very much. My name is Nihal Saad. I'm from the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations. I'm also, I've been a journalist for 18 years. So I just have a comment also rather than a question. Because it looks like that we know now, or we are in agreement that there is a distinction between free speech and hate speech that leads to incitement. The question is where you draw the line, where you do not infringe on the freedom of expression. This is where the question becomes very tricky. At the United Nations Alliance of Civilization, we are working on a hate speech project in order to see what are the best practices and where to draw the line exactly. What journalists are thinking. One of the issues that was raised actually was the traditional media, to distinguish between traditional media. I claim to belong to traditional media, where there are code of ethics and there is self-censorship, where you are very mindful of culturally sensitive terms that you should be aware of when you're writing your story, that you should not be using, so that you do not stereotype or lead to xenophobia or incitement. Well, the last point I wanted to make is that's the traditional media where they observe code of ethics and they are well educated and they know what they are talking about and they research their issues before writing about it. But there is another emerging platform, which is the social media, where it's practiced by citizen journalists or citizen bloggers. These, maybe they are not well informed, sometimes they have agendas, sometimes they are just not, they do not have the self-censorship that traditional journalists have. And this is where we should know, or we should ask ourselves the question, how to regulate these people. The Wall Street Journal, which is one of the major and most reputable newspapers in the United States, started in regulating the commentary by the viewers, because this is where really the incitement happens, the commentary under the story.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The gentleman, and then he was the third.
Another one?
Sorry? I'll just ask you, please, so that we give the maximum of time to everybody to be as short as possible. Not only you, everybody.
Sure, of course.
Yeah. Now we'll take those 3 questions and we'll come back to you.
My name is Kanesh. I represent the Search for Common Ground Kyrgyzstan office. And today we have heard in this room about the responsibility of the government, how the government is very repressive, and at the same time the guests also talked about the literacy, media literacy. But at the same, my question is about the media which is connecting these two. Is there any, the media? My question is about the responsible media. And what is, taking into account what Simon has said, taking into account of how the technology is developing today in the 21st century, and how the citizenship journalist is being encouraged, what is the future of the responsible media? What are we expecting? And is there any way that the media can make themselves be more responsible and accountable? Thank you.
Thank you. So we have Mr. Tariq Ansari, who had the comment on legal requirements and regulating restrictions, and Nihal about where do we draw the line on the hate speech and the stereotypes. I think you would like to answer.
I'll be very brief on the point that you raised, where do we draw the line? And I really try to be very brief. The red line is violence, call for violence. And we have different traditions here in Europe on dealing with hate speech. In United States, there is a First Amendment, so it's dealt with in a different way. But all in all, in my view, a red line is violence. In any case, no matter how offending, provocative, vulgar, irresponsible, not acceptable issues are discussed and said. I know it's not easy to digest this, but I do not see any other solution. Otherwise, we just go back to Orwellian society. We need to accept to be offended and to accept, what is something? Whatever you said, I don't mind. So it is something that again brings me back to the cases that I dealt with back in the time when I was working as director of broadcasting in my own country, where we shut down the station, radio station in a village after the war, calling for stoning people, refugees, coming back to their village. And we closed it down following proper procedures, also with the possibility to appeal. They said it's a free speech issue. And my answer was not. It's not free speech, it's anarchy. If you call for people to be killed, it's something that needs to be dealt with. And it has to be part of all parts of the community needs to address these things.
I'll be very brief. I mean, I think the problem is that, yes, there are lots of instruments, and there's a pantheon of legal precedents about the rights, responsibilities in international law. The problem is that the situation now in technology terms makes it much more difficult. And I'll give you a specific example. When I was in Iraq in 2004, there was a huge, as you remember, a huge problem with Al Jazeera in those days, putting out videos which were directly taken from Al-Qaeda, etc. The reaction of the Iraqi government was to ban Al Jazeera and to throw Al Jazeera out of Iraq. It was a totally useless gesture because in the time from the end of Saddam Hussein to within 6 months in Iraq, they had gone from 0 satellite penetration to something like 60%. Cheap Chinese satellite dishes were being sold on the streets in the immediate aftermath. People suddenly had all this access to satellite television. People were listening to Al Jazeera by direct-to-home satellite transmission. Made no difference. They were still seeing Al Jazeera, and all that Al Jazeera were doing was using the wire services to get the stories. So the point is that it's all very well having illegal instruments, but it's how you apply them to the technology, and it's a much more complicated situation now. Just trying to ban things or wanton rhetoric about how things are bad or should be stopped or closed down is meaningless when it either goes out online or it comes from direct-to-home satellites. So it's about practicalities as well as principle.
Thank you. There's a question of Mr. Kinnish about repressive media responsibility, the future of media and media's responsibility. Would you like to comment?
It's very important to locate the object of responsibility. For sure, media are responsible in the legal framework. They have to be obedient to the laws of the country. Media can be responsible or accountable towards some ethical demands, which are not imperatives, but this subject is located in the conscience of each journalist in some structures as well. But in many cases, up to my observations, the key object is the audience. If the medium is dependent on the audience, if its reputation is important to it, then you can observe responsibility. This media we call quality media, quality press. But in some cases, for media, audience means next to nothing. They are accountable to business or to political entities, political parties. In this particular case, the accountability is located towards political parties and business, not to the audience.
Thank you. The gentleman had a question, then this gentleman and the lady there, or both of you. Okay, I will come, one of you. Ah, sorry. I'm sorry. She was first. Yes, she was first. Sorry. You'll be next. We'll take them all.
Yeah,
We can take 4 this time.
I'm a journalist and I work in the area of the conflict for more than 24 years. And I hear to your comment about the media and the issue of the Islamic State and the responsibility of the media, and I have another point
Say her name?
of view.
Can I have your name? Sorry, just because later I can identify
Kauthar
you.
Salam.
Kauthar.
Salam, yeah. Actually, the issue of the Islamic State is not the issue of the journalists. Perhaps the media, it's played the most important role in educating people in way or another, but the issue of the Islamic State, it is very deep and bigger than this. If we come, for example, and look at the background of the Europeans who go from here, from AU, to join the fighters outside. What is the background of these people? They grow up here in the AU, they attended AU schools, but at the same time, they go to join the terrorists there. The question is, who are these terrorists and who financed them? And if these terrorists really, they are a threat for other countries and security or peace or not. And if they are a threat, then the issue is the issue of the government, the big governments in power. Why? They leave them. They are terrorists. We are talking about terrorists. If they are terrorists, they have to crush them once and forever and put an end for our headache. If they are not terrorists and somebody finances them to play a political role in way or another, then it's another issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Henrik Clausen from Den Korte Avis in Denmark.
Sorry, the first name?
The question is...
Your name, sorry?
Henrik Clausen.
Henrik. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. A short and simple question to the panel. Can the truth ever constitute hate speech? Thank you.
Okay. Very good. Yeah.
The question was, can the truth ever...
Can truth constitute hate speech?
Yeah, constitute. Okay. My name is Antti Pentika and I convene a network of religious and traditional peacemakers, and I have 2 questions, one for OSCE.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Antti Pentika and
so that I can...
Sure.
Yeah.
First is to OSCE. I was visiting today the King Abdullah Center for Dialogue, and they have a program for training the media to also have the moderate voices when they cover the radical voices. And it's a huge problem in Europe. What could you do to expand that? I think the point Victor made on the Islamic State is very valid. It's not only that phrase, using the phrase jihadi or extreme Islam is also very hurtful for a lot of Muslims and not really helpful. It's part of the propaganda. So if Obama did this in the US, what could you do in Europe to help us to understand these words? My second question comes to the moderator's question of the heroes. I spoke to a colleague that has analyzed about 400 ISIS recruitment messages in YouTube. And the 4 messages they are making is, first, they're humiliating the ulama. Second, they're humiliating the West. They are showing the hypocrisy of the religious leaders. And fourth, they're speaking about the social services they provide. There's very little religious reasoning, a little bit about the jihadi military narrative and a little bit about the service that every Muslim is obliged to do. But the bigger story is somehow confused and missed. And what can you do as a media, because the Western media is getting the big story wrong. It's about the hearts and minds of many people and where they believe it is a future. So what should the media do to get this big story available, the search for the big story also many nuanced, and the criticism that exists, for example, within Islamic State on the interpretation of Islamic law also present.
Thank you. There was this lady, and then you, and then this. Okay.
Hello.
I will take 4 and we'll come back to you. Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Grazia Golob. I am a student of the University of Ljubljana. I really agree on what you have said, the speech about media democratization, the media literacy. But I think that when we are talking about terrorism, extremism, I think the discourse goes way beyond this. So I think that when we are talking about the impact the propaganda of the terrorists makes towards people who then go to, for example, to ISIS and they join it. We are talking also about teenagers. We are often talking about young people who are disappointed of the crisis of their countries, and that's why they go there. So my question was, is it maybe time to speak or think about a different way also of a responsibility of the media by tackling media cooperation maybe with governments or with intergovernmental organizations in this regard? So not talking about only media representation, but actually thinking about how they should actually address those persons, the youth, to counter this, to make them think about, to make them react differently. I think that the propaganda the extremists are making is is reaching in even in subconscious. I only think about how maybe Osama bin Laden was represented and how the ISIS is represented now. I mean, the technology they're using, how they're dressed, what the symbolism they're showing is going way beyond. So how can we maybe address this in a different way, not just how we did it until now?
Thank you. Okay, we'll tackle those questions. There is Kauthar pointing at the fact that people from the EU, for example, are also joining ISIS and the terrorists. And she has a general question I think that everybody has. Who are those terrorists? Who finance them, etc.? But the fact that people from the EU are going, or from countries where more stable countries, if we can say, an open society, probably one point here is joining your question. I mean, is it racism? Is it the way they are being treated in those countries where they've been accepted or taken as when they came in? Who would like to address that? If you don't mind, I'm going to join both questions only on that point, the one of Garcia and Kauthar.
Well, I agree with you. Obviously, if we look at the roots of the problem, it might not be media at all. It comes from way beyond. And the topic here is how media can help address the issue. But obviously, this is a global phenomenon. It does not only appears in the southern countries, but we have someone here from Denmark, and we unfortunately have lived also drama there in Denmark. And I was talking not too long ago with someone, and I said we need education. Education is the key. It's because I really believe this, like most of us. And she answered to me, yeah, but you know, the terrorists that made these crimes in Denmark were not undereducated. They were actually highly educated. So now, can we say that education is still the key factor for these people? So this is one question, and this is when we get to the point that indeed there is a problem of how they feel within society. Obviously, like you said, and I understand your point, you don't really agree to link this with religion, and I totally understand and I agree. But yet, if you want to be honest, today, when we talk about extremism, when we talk about radicalism, unfortunately, most of the time it's linked to religion. At least this is what they claim. Now we can say they are not Muslim, but they claim to be. So maybe there is a problem of how the community feel around the world. Maybe it's I mean, we can see in Muslim country there is, they are becoming more and more conservative because people need today, and not only a Muslim community, but it seems to be a global phenomenon. We need to know who we are. We need to know what our identity is. We need to know what the nation is. It's like we are all living this very existential question today. And to some extent, and to its extreme, it appears to be extremism. But sometimes I also say that it's like history. It's a déjà vu. It's a déjà vu. Yeah, because today it's the dark nights of Islam. Before it was Christianism. Just that there were no social media at that time. So sometimes it's like a décalage horaire, you know, and unfortunately today it seems to be even more difficult to tackle it because it can go global. Obviously it starts from local points, but with the internet, social media, traditional media, it goes global. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, as we said, radicalization is not new, that's definite.
Yeah, and I would like to, your question was very interesting. Can true be a speech of hate? It's like a philosophic essay. We can spend much time talking about. My answer is yes. I think the true can sometimes be speech. Yeah, can fuel it. Why? Simply because sometimes true is awful.
So yeah, I was going to say now, Henrik asked this question: can truth constitute hate speech? So, I mean, this is, would you like to, or Simon? It does, in fact, it does, it can, absolutely. But it doesn't mean we should ignore it.
I had a temptation to say no, never. But I imagine, one day my wife bought something that, up to my observation, was not good to her. And if I say to her the truth, would it be hate speech from my side? Yeah, therefore, yes, my reply is no. Still.
Yeah, truth sometimes hurts. Would anyone, or shall we pass to the other question? No?
I think I'll go to another question.
Okay. I think there's a thin line of how things are built. But you were saying something also about religion, if I may comment here. It's the responsibility of the media is to clarify some things in order to have less of this hate speech, because there is misunderstanding about so many things concerning religion, and it's too easy to just stereotype it and have it, because you want to do it quickly, you want to put a background, so you take a background where you can find so many errors and specifications that are not there.
Yeah, and just sometimes we use the word moderate. He's a moderate Muslim. This is the kind of expression I really feel like we should ban from our, speech, because what is a moderate Muslim? No, it's like we are Muslim or we are terrorists, but moderate Muslim to me sounds bad, although I can...
Yeah, because we never hear moderate Christian, for example.
Yeah.
It's, but it became part of the conversation now, and those are the stereotypes that we were trying to mention when we were talking about religion. Now there is Ante that had a multiple question, in fact, that comes back to, correct me if I'm wrong, to hate. You are also pointing at this, right? I mean, is there anyone who would like to comment on his question about truth and hate? Yes, yeah.
I mean, I'm going to sort of become sophist about it, I'm afraid, because the point is that it's, direct and black and white questions like that cannot have black and white answers. I mean, truth is a perception in many cases, whose truth is perceived by who. And that's the problem. And I think when it comes to the relationship between truth and hate speech, I think what Donia is saying is that once there is an overt call for violent acts, that's when the red line is crossed. The discussion about, whether reporting on events and stories in a way which points guilt and fingers at different communities, that's a difficult issue. And I think it's, you know, it's something that's much more complicated. So it goes back to the whole question of actually, you know, the way these things are reported. I mean, you know, I was a soldier for a long time, and one of the things that is always interesting is actually when you see reports on incidents, military incidents, somebody will give you a very different view of an event that took place depending what side of the hill they were on when they saw it. And so, you know, that person is absolutely convinced that the event took place in this way, and the other person sitting on the other side of the hill will give you an absolutely different version of the same event, and they are convinced that that's the truth. So I think we have to be careful about that, and it's about reporting it in the balanced way if possible. But I'd like to return to the question, the last question, and this is again, this is a huge issue. Scott and I actually were talking about this earlier, and it's a very difficult thing to get into. But the problem is that yes, educated people do become involved in terrorism. I mean, this is not an Islamic thing. I mean, we just have to go back to the Red Brigades, the Baader Meinhof, the IRA. I mean, these aren't necessarily down to religion. It's about people looking for a cause and needing to reject the system with which they find themselves in. The first thing I think we need to understand that actually this is a small phenomena. Despite the fact that it predominates in the media, actually the numbers of people who actually go to do these things as a percentage of the communities that we're talking about is tiny. And I think these are the sorts of things that we need to understand. And the problem is that what is the narrative that we are offering to talk up our own society's values? And I think this is something that has been lost in the developed world, is our ability to advocate and speak on behalf of the things that we're talking about here, the whole question of universal values. The trouble is that we look at it in terms of national or regional values, and I was in the UN the other day talking to the head of the task force, the Global Counter-Terrorist Task Force in the UN, about this precise issue. And what the UN are trying to do is to try and think about what should be a global narrative that basically sets down a perception of universal values which everybody, no matter where they come from and what their religious position, should adhere to. And that to give some form of counterbalance to these very narrow things. And that's a huge undertaking, and it will take a long time. But I think, you know, there has become a sort of devaluation of our own liberal values in our societies, which we need to talk up. Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm not sure. Did you actually oppose educated and Islamists, or?
No, I'm not. What I'm saying is that the fact that people who are educated become terrorists is not necessarily just about Islamism. I mean, there have been plenty of precedents in the past where people who are highly educated have become terrorists with a different cause, be it the Baader Meinhof, be it by the race. So what I'm saying is that it's about finding an alternative cause to the one that you find yourself, the system in which you find yourself in.
I think Ante, what he spoke about is the big story being wrong. I mean, isn't it, if we understood you right? And you mentioned the heroes, and I think the insistence on the heroes is that there is a generation, at least in the Arab world, who has been attracted and some terrorists are presenting themselves as heroes, and the lack of hero has created this vacuum where now is the time to have real heroes that could attract a generation with the good instead of the bad. Oh my God. But I have to be fair. I don't know who was first. Sorry? You were. No, it's true.
Yeah, I can speak?
We will come to all of you.
Can I? Yeah, okay. My name is Mirina Betsa. I'm counselor of the Ukrainian mission to the OSCE, and I have a few questions, very short ones, against the backdrop of Russian aggression against my country. As you all know, for more than a year, my country, a very peaceful nation, has been a victim of the Russian aggression, and on a daily basis we witness information war waged by Russian state-controlled media, which incite hatred, violence, and aimed at destroying peace and security in my country. In this regard, I would like to ask our distinguished panelists 3 questions. First, how to safeguard freedom from propaganda, because this is one of the most important freedoms which everyone should be entitled to in any democratic society. My second question is how to effectively counter propaganda. Yes, indeed, we spoke here about media literacy, about strengthening independence of media. These are very important issues, but we should distinguish propaganda in the broader context and propaganda of war. And in practical terms, what should be done immediately to stop propaganda of war, which actually kills people on a daily basis? And my third question, what would be the recommendations of the distinguished panelists, how to also protect the freedom of expression and freedom of the media on one hand, and the legitimate aims of the government to protect its citizens from the participating state which uses media as an instrument of warfare? Thank you so much.
One of the two, I don't know. Yeah, but after... Okay, we'll take four, so you don't kill each other. but first,
So, my name is Rania Mati. I'm a law student, and I would like to go back to the Randa's statement. If the truth can be hate speech, would hiding the truth mean tackling today's horrifying terror? If the truth can be a hate speech, would hiding the truth mean tackling today's horrifying terror?
But you meant, I think, Leila. She meant that. My name is Randa. She's Leila. It's okay. Okay, but you heard the question, so we will answer after. So the two gentlemen here, both of them, and then you. We're going to take 5.
I have no question, I have a small comment. Leila was wondering what means moderate in Islam. I am Moroccan ambassador. I would like to tell you that I am proud seeing you here, and congratulations for your added value to this debate, because you are coming from a Muslim country, and you are moderate. And I tell you, moderate, it's a very noble word in the culture of Islam, and it refers to the well-known school, Sunni school, based on doctrine of Ash'ari. Means that when you are behaving, when you are dealing with Islam, you are injecting, you are introducing the context. If you deal with the text, you have literalist attitude, and you have rationalism. You introduce rationalism, you introduce context. That is, you are moderate. You are not attached to the text as it is.
Thank you. So now a question? No? Oh, okay. Then we can take the lady here. Thank you. The name, please?
Yes, you'll have. My name is Fatma Jarani Azgan. I work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Turkey. And on the moderation of Islam, I think I slightly disagree with His Excellency Ambassador, and my ideas would go closely in solidarity with our fellow Muslim woman, which is you, Leila. And by the way, my question to you is, now there are 3 things, there are 3 levels of media radicalization. I'm not even talking about terrorism and media, which I think would agree everyone here that there's a symbiotic relationship there. They do feed each other. This terrorism is about attracting the attention of the public opinion. That's why there is violence into it. On the radicalization, which is a totally different issue, and I hope to address drivers of that tomorrow in the panel as a panelist. But there is radicalization through media. Is that possible? You said there's self-radicalization is not possible, but then it actually might be. There are cases of self-radicalization by individual-driven efforts, less of pull factors, more of push factors. So how effective can media be? And I take radicalization not in the sense of Islam, religion per se, because like in Turkey we have at least 4 different forms of radicalization, as the gentleman here referred to. There are different groups who are consisting of individuals who have radicalized before they became terrorists. But then there's another one. We had a dilemma in Turkey. I believe the media representative of the OSCE would know. When the prosecutor was killed, there was a prosecutor who was killed by 2 terrorists. They have broadcasted the killing through the internet on the media channels that the terrorist group operates in another country, to another country. So from the internet-based TV, it was broadcasted live. And of course there was a harsh reaction from part of the society, from the government. There was a huge discussion in Turkey about the limits. Who should be broadcasting that? What sort of impact would broadcasting such a thing on the radicalization? So this is a very complex debate, but there are limits. So my question is, where are the limits?
Okay, thank you. Because we're running out of time, the gentlemen. I think it will have to be the last question unless the Secretary General will tell me otherwise. Last question. Last question, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Oh, we forgot you. No, I have to take it. Sorry, 2 questions then, yeah.
Yes.
I apologize.
Steve Coughlin, Pax Europa. My question is, it seems to me that what's going on is there's an attempt to establish a meta-narrative on how to talk about events such that non-conforming opinions then get branded as hate speech, they get pushed down. And this meta-narrative is established by a media-government relationship in which there's an agreement that you're going to then propagandize a public. And the reason I put it that way is because once you decide that facts on the ground as they present themselves can be considered hate speech, this is no longer about truth in any sense of the word, capital T, small t. This isn't about a guy on one side of the hill seeing the bullets coming and saying, that's my reality, that's a total truth, and the guy firing saying, I fired, that's a total truth, and we can kind of arbitrate between the facts what happened. This is about confabulating a narrative and then deciding to impose it on people and designating people who don't agree as haters. Once you decide that facts can be hate, what distinguishes this from just disinformation of the purest form? That's the question I would like to ask.
Thank you. I just need your first name. Is it Steve?
Stephen.
Yeah, Stephen, sorry. Okay, and last question.
Good evening, I'm Anna-Katharina Deininger. I am the OSCE Chairmanship Special Representative on Youth and Security, and I would have the following question. Well, young people are for sure very active in new media. They are for sure important actors in a changing media landscape. So what do you think will the future bring? Do you think that educated, internet-savvy young people will in the future behave differently with media in general, and do you think that therefore radicalization threats will be reduced in the future? And which recommendations could you give to young people who encounter any kind of possible radicalization on the internet? May it be comments on articles, may it be videos on YouTube or whatever. How do you think should they behave, and to which places should they go? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So, Maria, was it how to safeguard freedom from propaganda, media literacy, distinguishing propaganda of war, and the recommendation to protect freedom of expression, protect the population. If I may, I'm going to link it with the last question, because you're talking about also the young generation, the landscape, and how can we reduce the threats in the future. Which recommendation would we give to young generation, how to protect them, how to behave? Counterattack, you mean, or counter the influence of what they're getting from the internet? Anybody?
It's very difficult to connect question from Mariana and the question about youth, because there are 2 different, in a way, things. My answer to propaganda is, I mean, well known to you and to most of distinguished ambassadors here, so I will not go into too many details. But my answer, to be very brief, is always in relation to propaganda or any kind of hate speech or radical speech, is that we should not fight fire with petrol, but with water. And what we need to do is to put more into the issues that are very much related to universal values. Again, I know that many do not like this long way to address these things, but that's the only way I see as potentially solving some of the problems our societies are facing. Simply trying to stop certain views is not going to solve the problem. It is a short-term way of dealing with things. There were also several other questions related to what can the OSCE do, and also linking it with work of King Abdullah's center here in Vienna in a way that's very difficult to relate, because we are a multilateral organization dealing with different things than this kind of organization. We do engage in trainings with journalists, but my main focus are the governments that need to deliver based on the commitments that they agreed upon. And of course, in this process, it is very important. Even if we talk about responsible media, governments need to make sure that the media is free and that they can work freely in their countries. They need to enable environment for media to be able to address issues. Responsibility will come afterwards. So you cannot tackle the responsibility before you make sure that there is an independent judiciary, there is a rule of law, there are different voices addressing all the issues in the society. Public service broadcasting, it's not an easy way, but again, it is the only way. Any radical ways on tackling these issues is not something that I would recommend, based on my own experience, but also based on everything that we see nowadays.
Are you satisfied with the answer, Maria? No, I mean, because you've had 3 points, and maybe I summarized it too quick. Yes? The other panelists. So I thought so.
It's always very difficult to address propaganda, because from the very first moment we have to define the term. And as you probably know, the definition of propaganda is problematic. Used to be problematic and still is. Now we have voices that call propaganda as a very positive activity for promoting certain set of values, rejecting these negative connotations. And in this particular sense, the word propaganda is used in, for example, in the title of Vatican congregation Propaganda Fidei, just promoting faith. But I hope I understood what you are asking about using not appropriate practices in journalism, in media coverage. And up to my opinion, the effects of propaganda depend on 3 main factors. First one, the level of the monopolization of media market in particular society or particular country. If the media market is monopolized, propaganda is more effective. The second is the audience factor. To what extent the audience has resistance towards propaganda, and we can again use this term of media literacy, so needed for some societies. And the third factor is political one. The propaganda effects depend on those who sets the agenda. the more plural set of people we have, the bigger variety of views we have, the less effects of propaganda is. But if we have society with monopolized media market, with not resistant audience, and with as well very small number of people who makes decision of what to expose and what to hide, we have very fertile ground for propaganda. And I think that both countries, Russia and Ukraine, are of such case. Yeah, they have, as I mentioned in Russia, I don't know Ukrainian figures, but more than 90% of population, they watch TV every day. I can quote Levada Center public opinion polls. And for 51%, it's the only source of news. You can imagine that the effectiveness of propaganda, how high it could be, and it is in fact. Thank you.
Okay, I think Rania, it was about hiding the truth. Would anyone want to answer Rania's question?
No, I can answer. Don't worry.
The one who made that.
No, it's just he was taking the microphone, so I was being nice. So actually, I believe that truth can be not always, but truth can constitute hate speech, because sometimes truth is difficult, horrible in itself. So Simon actually gave a piece of answer earlier, saying that sometimes when you report on facts and these facts point out a community, then it can be a source of hateful speech. So your question was, does that mean that hiding the truth would be a mean to tackle the hate speech? I would answer, sometimes it is. And sometimes we do, by not saying the entire truth. And it sometimes takes the form of the politiquement correct. For example, in France, you are not allowed in the polls, the survey, to integrate the race, the religion, the ethnic ground of the people, because you don't want it to be eventually used in hate speech. So yes, sometimes it is used that way, but not always. If you talk about this specific issue of radicalism, I'm not talking about it. This is why I said sometimes it can be a source of hate speech, and sometimes we can prefer not to mention it. This is what someone said just behind
Stephen,
you,
I think.
and it's very interesting, and I think all this is linked. Now, how is the limit between this and misinformation? I think that's the word you use.
Well, Stephen said the narrative of the hate speech had facts on the ground. How can you once decide that facts can be hate, right?
Yeah, that's a very tricky question. You cannot. You just decide how you can say things. But
I mean, he has a very legitimate point.
Yeah.
I mean, if we consider some of the facts are hate speech, then we're hiding facts, or we're taking judgment beforehand, right? That's what you were saying, Stephen.
What I'm saying is, for example, I didn't name ISIS Islamic State, they did.
Yeah.
I didn't take territory, they did. I didn't bring people under my governance, they did. I didn't do all these things, they did. And for you to say we can't call them the Islamic State when in fact they are, and that they're executing what they're calling Sharia law against the people who are actually dead because it happened, that's a material misrepresentation of an actual fact. And you are leading the public by not representing that. If you're saying it's hate speech to know what they're doing, the hate would be on the actor, not the people being aware of it. This is that would be a deliberate attempt to mislead a public on something they might or might not take an interest. You're gauging what hate is based on how people might appropriately respond to something they could reasonably consider to be a threat. And that is the exact opposite of what a free press is supposed to do. You're subordinating facts
No, I'm not saying this is a totally valid point, and actually it's a question I ask myself very often when I see the way news are addressed. That does not mean I agree with it. And I mean, with the Islamic State, I was the one saying that they're calling themselves Muslims, so we should call them Muslim terrorists. This is what they call themselves, this is what they are, but also we must say that they are terrorists, not only Muslim. And this is why I link to the moderate point. I totally understand what we mean when we say moderate Islam. It's just that I don't agree with it, because it's like saying she's a Muslim, but hey, she's okay, you know?
You're saying I cannot oppose people who oppose ISIS by calling them moderate. I'm just saying the same rule should apply to ISIS. I don't have a dog. I don't have a dog in that hunt. I would say that the side that wins will define Islam for that part of the world, regardless of whether whatever population agrees or disagrees with it. And not knowing that can lead to bad decisions.
On journalistic ethics, I have to agree with Stephen on the fact that in particular, when it comes to journalism, written journalism, which is different from a TV show where you are more free of expressing things. You cannot call somebody a terrorist unless somebody calls them a terrorist and you put it between quotes. You are obliged to say the Islamic...
I mean, we call someone a terrorist when he perpetuates acts of terror.
Yes, but you have a group and they have a name. I mean, you cannot add the word terrorist. You can, outside the code, then add it for different reasons. Well, anyhow, this is a vicious circle here. Now, we finished with the questions, but... No, I did not come to you yet. I'm talking to the lady behind you. Yes. Okay, go ahead.
I mean, I'm, as I said, a law student, and I know very well what our laws constitute. And the thing you talked about, you are not talking about facts. I mean, protecting people on because of their ethnical background or religious or whatever. These are not facts. We were talking about facts. Could a truth as a fact be a hate speech? And you said yes, and by your answering you didn't answer. You just switched to something very totally different.
We're going in circles here.
If you want, maybe you did not get my point. We can have a coffee later.
I think you can do that because we have still to answer Fatima. She spoke of 3 levels of radicalization through media. Is that possible? And how effective the media can be. Can anyone would...
And I just want to add, just to the gentleman I don't know here, I will not accept. Can I just get the mic then?
But we have to be quick.
I know you're hurried, but then I will not accept here as a Muslim that those people who are killing people in the name of my religion, that if they succeed, they will have the right to define my religion. That I do not accept, and I make this as a personal statement, not of a diplomatic official statement. It's a personal statement. That's what I call Islamophobia, and I'm sorry.
Okay, so on the other question, do you want answers to your question? Yes. Anybody? I think we are. And Anna Katerina, that's why I wanted to join both questions together, because you were saying about recommendation on the internet. I know they were completely different subjects, but it would have been a good opportunity to have it done. Yeah, I know, but I think they ended the session before. No, we have to quickly. And do you have any idea how can young generation be?
Yeah, if I can just say something, I think it's very interesting, and I think it's very critical, because many things happen on the internet and with the young people. I will just go back to the idea of hero. Earlier, before we spoke about we need heroes, okay? Maybe hero is it's a word a little bit too loaded, you know, it's a little too much. Let's speak about voices. We need voices. We need people with conviction. We need example. We need inspiration. I think young people needs that too. Either it over the internet or TV or traditional media or conferences, wherever. I, for example, go to see students in Morocco quite very often, as much as I can, just to give them other alternatives, to talk to them about other possibilities, to try to open up their mind to other things. I believe in local action. This is why I said, I think here in the room, everyone can be an actor, very active, can be a voice. So I think sometimes we must stop try to find global, political, the miracle solution, because there is not. We will not be able to regulate internet and every citizen behind his laptop. But we can, as a citizen ourselves, be an inspiration in our home, in our class, in our company, in our organization, and that can lead to the change. Gandhi said one day that, not me, he said, you must be the change you want to see in the world. And I think it's very critical today to really appropriate this sentence. I think if you are here, you are all very sensitive to the issue. So you can all be an actor in this regards.
Thank you, Leila. So I don't have to say any closing remarks. I think Leila did it. And I think we have important points that were raised here. I'll say them really briefly. I mean, everybody was talking about hate speech, not the stereotype, the responsibility of the media, and the fact that young generation is being affected and influenced, and even people living in the EU are joining. Many questions that we will put on paper, and thank you very much for attending and participating.
May from my part, I would like to thank Gada for difficult job, but very well done, and the panelists, excellent contributions. I found this fascinating beginning of our Security Day, and as I was watching the discussion, I was thinking the whole Security Day could revolve around just this issue. So difficult but also interesting it is. It is leaving us with perhaps more questions than answers, but the debate itself has brought up so many questions, so many issues, that I think it has enriched also our understanding of the problem. And this is certainly one of the things we are after ourselves, try to understand better the issues we are dealing with. This is only one angle of the broader topic that we are discussing. In fact, one of the big issues that we had, and the big problems we had in organizing the Security Day, was to come up with a title that was broad enough to include all the sides, the different angles of this topic. Certainly the media side of it is a very relevant one. I think I couldn't agree more with the last words of Leila, and the fact that on the media side, but on every aspect of this, the human factor and the contribution that each of us can give is essential, is important. So it is also good that we have this debate. Now, one of the interesting aspects in this whole event of the Security Day, and there are issues, we have also tweets coming in, and we'll try to feed them in the debate tomorrow, but they are, even though they are part of or a result of the debate that took place today, is that the OSCE in itself, through its institutions, covers many of these angles. In fact, all the representatives of the institutions, beginning with Dunia today, and tomorrow we'll have Michael and Astrid also on the podium and the panels, are relevant in addressing different aspects of this. In this, I would like to pay a special tribute to Odir and to Michael Link, whom I would like to join me for a moment here to say a couple of words at this stage. Michael helped us a lot in putting together the initial concept for this Security Day. Odir, of course, has a fundamental role within the organization in addressing issues of tolerance and non-discrimination, which is at the center of this discussion. And I'm particularly grateful to him for the support and the work that he's done in helping us launch the idea and develop the initial concept. So I will pass the mic to Michael. We will continue tomorrow, but we will have a moment outside to have a drink together. I think this was a brilliant start of the discussion. Looking forward to an intense day of discussions and perhaps of arguments that we'll have around these issues. Why not? I think it's important. It touches us from so closely, and that it gets us involved in the discussion. That's good. That's positive. That's the whole point. So thank you to all of you for your contribution. I'm sorry we couldn't, for reasons of time, listen to everybody and interact with everybody, but there is time and there will be more opportunities to continue this tomorrow. Michael, on your side, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lamberto. The thanks is exclusively up to the team of ODIHR. For ODIHR, tolerance and non-discrimination is indeed at the very center of our attention, and one of the activities, of course, which we really increase a lot in this time, and especially when it's about an effect on a joint exercise in what we can do as OSCE together, Secretary General, institutions, in fighting violent extremism and especially fighting all phenomenons, of course, which now keep us so busy today, be it in the area of media, religion, and other areas. Therefore, of course, I think the Secretary General Lamberto said everything. For us, it's a privilege to be part of the Security Days because it shows very clearly that there is only one comprehensive understanding of security, especially in the OECD. That is OSCE. That is the landmark of us, of course, that we have this comprehensive understanding of security in all its ways, of course, in all its three dimensions. So I know, of course, that now I'm the only one standing between you and a nice reception. Therefore, I finish. I thank you very much, and I thank especially the brilliant team also of ODIHR and everybody who was facilitating this very fantastic and fascinating night owl session. Thank you very much.